Okie dokie. Good morning. Let's test it out. What do we have? How many people watching? All right, let me see. I want to make sure it's all good. Mm-hmm. All right. Oh, it's not loading. Is it loading? I'm not sure. Maybe my connection. Guys, sorry, just still checking if everything is working. Sorry, I just can't. Just want to make sure it's all good. Very slow. Okay. Lots of tabs are open. That's why it's so slow loading for me. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, good. Everything's working. Okay, jump. Perfect. All right, so let's. Good morning, Prime. So let's continue our discussion on Vita money. So on the Vita money discussion, we kind of paused about 2 weeks ago. Let's just start with ghostDAO first, quickly. What I'm sharing on the screen. So this is Cipollio. So we have good price, about $1,400 soon per Casper. About 1 million of Casper has been bridged at the price of therefore what 1,500 here. So good morning, Mr. IDK as well. So therefore we have about 500 Caspers bridged. Actually 600 Caspers bridged, which is quite nice because the initial Genesis on Ghost was 400, so the APY is just insane. You can calculate that APY yourself. So what we have here is we do have the backing of $150 roughly, and when we go to the to see what is really being back in the treasury, we're looking at 1.8 million USD. So that is at this moment 1.8 million GDAI. So this is something we're going to be discussing with the council members soon. Also going to be discussing with whales. The idea is this. Since Ethereum Classic won on this recent proposal 7 in Wales, which was quite interesting, uh, the problem with Ethereum Classic, well, the advantage of Ethereum Classic, it's a really, as one of the whales mentioned, it's a really nice fit. It's a really nice fit for Ghost chain, and also for Ethereum Classic. It's kind of the guys who did not sell onto the proof of stake of Ethereum, um, who said that truth is more important than the hack, so who were completely against the fork. But the activity on Ethereum Classic is pretty bad, and because there are not that many good interesting dApps, but the community is really aligned. So the problem with that is there's not that many good stable coins on Ethereum Classic mainnet. So therefore, even if you deploy on Ethereum Classic testnet, so what? So the idea came out of that. plus we internally have been discussing this for quite some time, that maybe instead of using a stable coin as a backer, maybe we should be just using the native coin. So instead of using stable coins such as DAI, God forbid, Tether, or Circle, maybe we should just proceed with a native coin, say Ethereum, ETH itself, or ETC itself. So therefore, while the treasury may still be denominated in dollar terms, just for everybody's ease, in reality, instead of ghostDAO, it will be ETH as a backer, or ETC as a backer, or Matic as a backer, or BNB as a backer, and so on and so forth. So it's going to be the coins of EVM blockchains backing the treasury and the LP, therefore. So the LP then, the LP payer instead of ghostDAO will be eghost ETC, or eghost ETH, or eghost BNB, and so on and so forth. So this kind of idea, proposal, whatever, suggestion has lots of cons. Well, has some cons, has lots of pros. In particular, the process will be significantly eased because currently, if you have Cipolla ETH, you have to go to the faucet, right? And then you have to swap from your Ethereum to the ghostDAO. So that step will be gone. So no longer will you need, so essentially this whole faucet thing will probably be gone as well. So therefore, you just go to the DEX right away, and on the DEX you're just swapping from say ETC to eCasper, then you wrap it, and then you bridge it. So 3 steps as opposed to 4 steps. So and thanks to the whales who have been supporting Ethereum Classic, because I personally voted for Gnosis, and I was quite what's the word? Well, I wouldn't say surprised. I was quite happy that it was the community decision, which kind of was not what I voted for, which shows again maturity of the community. And ETC again will just not be possible with the stablecoin, because they have a stablecoin, but the stablecoin is very, very centralized. And to be honest, it does not have that much market capitalization. So everybody should be thinking about how to improve the protocol. Now, because of that, because we may decide to, and like we need to make that decision fast. We already had internal calls. Seems like we're all in alignment that native coin would be nice to have it as a back instead of DAI. Problem is the deployment therefore will be delayed. So if we just kind of redeploy this version will take, I don't know, maybe a couple of days, maybe like half a week to redeploy an Ethereum Classic. But if we are to change things out, then it will take longer. Based on our calculations, may take a month. And are we okay with that or not? And kind of my thing is we should be okay with that, because here's the thing. We launched, like every single iteration of ghostDAO brings something new. So the first iteration of ghostDAO on Cipolla, just not this one, but the previous one, just was buggy, right? So we've uncovered lots of bugs from Olympus DAO time, and we fixed those bugs. And Olympus DAO did not, so that was good. Then we went for Hoodie, and Hoodie version was without the bugs, but also without the bridge. Then we redeployed Cipolla, so now Cipolla has no bugs and also has a bridge. So then the next iteration could be on Ethereum Classic, where it will have a bridge, it will have no bugs, it will have a bridge, and it will be having the native coin as native coin as a backer. And then the next iteration after that would be to also add governance to it. So we'll have probably like 5 iterations, maybe more, 5 iterations of ghostDAO at minimum that I think we should have. And the reason why we're doing them in iterations is because we need to make sure you guys test it and understand how everything works. It's just easier that way, as opposed to just, let's just bring everything all at once, and it's like so many things to pay attention to. So that's quick update on DAO. Now, I would love to go back to Vita, because Vita is such a huge concept, and we paused for about 2 weeks. So let's go back. So last time we discussed the agricultural origins of Vita money about 2 weeks ago. And so there's lots of historical evidence that livestock was actually used as living currency, and that's where we paused. But we also had seed-based monetary systems. So, for example, in China, ancient China, the bushels of grain were used as tax payment. So remember that modern monetary theory, the MMT, where they said, money was whatever was used for tax payments. Well, I mean, even in their case, it was bushels of grain then, right? Like whatever they said, like they all like, essentially. The great thing about Vita money is both Austrians, well, Austrians, Keynesians, MMTs, it seems like all economists confirm that Vita money was the first type of money, no matter how you look at it. And that's the interesting part. Now, ancient Egyptians used wheat and credits based on wheat as the blood for their complex banking and financial system. So exactly what happened was uh, they the introduction of it seems like in ancient Egypt the introduction of credit payments has been denominated in wheat, which is also quite interesting, right? And what Aristotle writes about, like grain in particular, and kind of what he was writing on mostly, he was thinking that money needs to have needs to be the medium of exchange, and it also needs to have fundamental value, right? So, for example, he says here, like in 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 uh, in his work here in politics, he said, others maintain that coined money is a mere sham. So he was discussing like multiple points of view. It's not that he said that that's like, it's not that Aristotle necessarily said that that's the case, but he was just going into the discussion. So he said like, oh, maybe like in the first, like in the previous part, right preceding this paragraph, he was discussing that some people believe that like coin money is good money. Like it's the money, right? But then he said, but others maintain that coin money is a mere sham, a thing not natural but conventional only, because if users substitute another commodity for it, it is worthless. And because it is not useful as a means to any of the necessities of life, and indeed, he who is rich in coin may often be in want to necessary food. So he said, like, listen, like, unless money has real value that you can consume, for example, it's not money. Well, at least in this paragraph, right? Kind of, he was describing the view, and he was very much agreeing with this view throughout politics. Well, how can that be wealth of which a man may have a great abundance and yet perish with hunger? So, like, you have lots of gold, but you cannot eat because let's assume there's no liquidity for gold. Nobody wants gold in your village, right? In your tribe. What you gonna do? That's not money, right? So, like Midas in Fable, whose insatiable prayer turned everything that was said before him into gold. Right? So that was the discussion back in the day. So Aristotle was saying the same thing. Like, listen, guys, like money has to be uh, useful for for something in an average real life. And if it's not, so right, the gold bucks, for example, like AK, say Peter Schiff and the likes. Again, nothing against gold. Gold is a great kind of absolutely great money, great reserve currency. They keep saying that hey, gold is actually being used, in jewelry and in wires for for your computers and stuff like that. So in some manufacturing, so gold is being used in actual production as well. So that's the argument. But back in the day, gold was not used for anything outside of just jewelry, essentially, right? Jewelry and some churches had gold, right? So stuff like that. So ornamental plus jewelry, but nothing like production. Still value. Austrians would say it's still value, and that's true. But in the eyes of Aristotle, not true because okay, good, you have the ornament, that's amazing, but can you consume it? No, you can't. So that's not good money. Now, otherwise, apples, okay, apples or whatever, or, wheat, um, barley, livestock, that stuff you can consume. So again, Aristotle did not openly say Vita money is the money, but read between the lines, and he's discussing why coin money is not good money. Okay, so that's this. Now, the interesting part about agricultural money, including both livestock and seed money, is the storage durability. Let's just call it that, right? So, right or wrong, but roughly, so sheep, right, 5 to 10 year lifespan, and the cows mostly, right, it's 10 to 15. Wheat is 2 to 3. And of course, that was, maybe it's extended today, given, refrigerations, like the meat, actual meat could be frozen for, for decades. It actually is frozen for decades in certain like government freezers in case of war that exist in almost every single country, like the provision, right? But meat cannot reproduce itself, right? So meat is the product of livestock. The livestock itself is, it will die. Like we all have, a deadline. And also, an interesting part is the recreation cycle: 150 days, 280 days. So therefore, you cannot force cattle to recreate faster. You can't. Like, if it takes 280 days, it takes 280 days. Nothing you can do. Now, what very few people talk about when it comes down to, and the reason why they don't talk about this much, is due to the fact that there's not a lot of, and we're going to be discussing this probably in the next couple of months, because there's so many other articles that we need to go over. Very few people, like people say, oh, like stock market goes up by whatever, 10% a year roughly, right? Like gold goes up, well, 12% historically. Gold goes up by roughly 6% a year. Okay, cool. Like inflation is like roughly whatever, 3%, 4% per year in USD. But what is the average appreciation in livestock, right? Like nobody talks about that, right? Like, because we, although almost all of us 100 years ago would be farmers as our occupations, today nobody knows about the appreciation percentage. Like, how much more would we grow? And that's an impressive, interesting statistic. And when you try to look online, you're not going to be able to find much. Of course, you'll be able to find like the stock of certain, whatever farming companies, how much it increases by, but that's the stock price. The stock price does not really have to deal much with with the assets, for example, right? So it's very tough to distinguish what that is. It's very tough to find that information online as well, surprisingly, because we all eat it every single freaking day. So why is that information is not so open? Why is it so much hidden? That's a question that you guys shall answer yourselves for yourselves. But overall, that's the case, right? So how much time? How much time? Like, what is the ROI essentially? Like, what's the ROI on my farm? Right? What's the ROI on my livestock herd? Right? So that's something interesting, and chances are it's going to be beating. Not only is it going to be inelastic because you cannot produce it on a wish, right? Not only it's also kind of has its own scarcity type of mechanisms of natural death, virus, diseases, etc. Lack of supply, lack of demand, but also the APY is insane, most likely, right? So, and that's what we kind of don't discuss, but chances are that APY is beating the APY from other industries such as stock market, the technology sector that is selling you air in most cases, right, and stuff like that. We're also going to be discussing AI. I'm going to be expanding one of the articles about how AI is a fad, because everybody talks about the opportunity of AI, but nobody talks about the fact that A, it's government owned, and B, because of the server expenses. So it's government owned. And it's a matter of time before it's already those of you guys who are using AI services, lots of services are closing down the freemium model, right? So to download stuff now you have to pay. The subscriptions going first now. Why? Because server costs are absolutely insane. B, the data will still be controlled by the entity controlling the servers, which is aka the government. And most importantly, what nobody talks about, very few people talk about, is the depreciation of the servers. Since the servers need to be working 24/7, depreciation is 1 year, 2 years. Then you have to replace it. It's insane amount of capital. It's very capital intensive industry. It's one of the, as some people say, AI in particular is one of the most capital intensive technological plays. The only more capital intensive kind of play in tech was the telecoms, right, with towers and stuff like that. Right. So think about that as well, right? So while you have AI is the next big thing, right? But farms at the same time will produce double-digit growth every single freaking year, right? While also being good money, and nobody talks about it because why would they, right? Because that's the most, and Bill Gates, what did he buy? Sold all Microsoft stock and bought farmland. Why? Because he's probably stupid, right? So think about that as well. In any case, the interesting part, right, about this kind of like self-replicating, self-everything is like the Vita money is then you start diving like in history. So one evidence that I did not mention here is the book of Genesis. So on the last call we discussed we call this, well, that's the name so far. Probably going to stick to this name. It's proof of 69 Genesis because everybody has like proof of history, proof of liquidity, proof of work, proof of stake, like proof of 69. It's memorable at least, right? Like, so what does it mean is we have to all run validator nodes for 69 days on the testnet in order to get the allocation on the mainnet. And while searching for the name, like while trying to figure out a good name, I kind of started diving back into the book of Genesis. Like maybe like we could come up with some name from there, from from the biblical sacred texts. And interesting, on day 5, like I may present this, I may actually edit this article on day 5, when God was creating, the fish and mammals and stuff. He was telling them to multiply. Literally, like Vita money. You won't find gold money anywhere outside of golden calf. And the golden calf, also think about, like, right, in the Jewish tradition, what's golden calf? It's golden Vita. Also, good idea to potentially mention that here in this article. You have so many historical proofs that Vita was the money. But specifically Fibonacci. So Fibonacci, the magnificent series in math, was actually about rabbits. So Fibonacci, his name was Leonardo of Pisa, but whatever his last name, I guess, was Fibonacci. So he created the Fibonacci series by explaining how rabbits would replicate themselves. So that was not an empirical exercise. That was a theoretical exercise. But he was explaining that theoretically. So you have one pair of rabbits, and he was essentially like writing out what's going to happen 12 months later. And then that series was extrapolated from just 12 units to more units in the set. So the first pair would just stay the first pair, and then this pair would breed this pair, etc., and then this pair would breed 2 more. Like that's how it is, right? So, and based on that Fibonacci, and we're using Fibonacci to the day. Lots of you guys who trade crypto cannot not know, right? Is that correct? About the Fibonacci levels, right? So Fibonacci levels coming from the Fibonacci series. So that's interesting. Now, another thing is tulip mania. So everybody says, oh, like Bitcoin is tulip mania, but it's not. Like, it's not Bitcoin that is tulip, because tulip is really Vita. So the reserve currencies therefore took, like when they describe the tulip mania, they say, oh, it's a Ponzi scheme, like essentially. But Bitcoin was not Vita, right? Why? So what was the whole point of tulip mania? So you would not be buying tulips. So tulips were originated from in Constantinople, which is modern Turkey. They got exported into Netherlands. So Netherlands imported tulips from Turkey, and then they became at first the sign of royalty, right? So, and then kind of how always the adoption begins. Like first, it's a super exclusive good, and then everybody who is not aristocracy also wants to behave like aristocracy, so they would be buying tulips as well. So then tulips would spread from aristocracy elites to just average citizens, average residents of Netherlands. And the idea for buying the tulip was not just to buy the tulip because of the price action. That's what they get wrong, right? So the idea for tulip was tulip would self-replicate as well. That was the most important part. So the idea is like, yeah, tulip is super expensive. The bulb is extremely expensive. However, that one bulb can then produce like 3 more bulbs the next year, right? That's why you pay a premium today, because you are expecting future revenues. So that was not like, again, the tulip mania, the tulip mania itself obviously followed this kind of Ponzi-like behavior, right? So like this was clearly Ponzi-like behavior between 1636 and 1637. So for this 1 year, even half a year, it was like massive upside and then massive downside. Conversely to what most people believe, Netherlands was not in ruins after this economically. So some people were, but overall the nation was totally doing fine. So nothing bad happened. But again, the proposition for people to invest into tulips was, listen, you're not just buying one tulip, you're buying one tulip plus the price and value of additional offspring of the tulip that will be produced by this bulb. That's how it was. And what this tells us is, again, not about the speculative, like any good technology may have a speculative cycle, like including internet.com had a speculative cycle. Internet technology is still worthy, right? So same thing with auto manufacturing, right? So these, all these companies were significantly overpriced. Kodak was significantly overpriced at some point in time as well, right before it went bankrupt. Later on, being replaced by photos like iPhones and stuff. Nokia as well. So like the technology itself could be good. We need to separate the technology and the price action around that technology. So tulip, was it good or not? Well, today the statistic is that Netherlands is representing 44% of worldwide flower trade. essentially, floral trade, floricultural trade. So was that a Ponzi scheme? I mean, one not big enough. I think it's 10 million population or something, right? Controls almost 50% of all the flower supply, followed by the tulip mania in particular, because it got so much widely adopted amongst residents, right? So was it like just scam? No, it wasn't. It's a great business, right? Like 77% of all flower bulbs, with tulips remaining the crown jewel, is being supplied by Netherlands. So that's quite a statistic with like 6 billion, right? So 6 billion of annual floral exports, which is huge for again a pretty tiny country of Netherlands as far as population. Um, but what we are kind of talking about here more is the fact that people genetically love Vita money. That's why they fell for it. That's why they fell for tulips. That's why they would fall for livestock. That's why they would fall for anything seed money. Why? That's why, like as I mentioned prior, like we always want percentage. We always want like stake. That's why the crypto is like, oh, staking, staking, staking. All that staking in crypto, most of it is unsubstantiated, as we showed last week. It's just inflation with no backing. But they are playing on our genetic need for the upside, for the stake, for the self-regeneration of the asset. Why? Why do we fall for that so easily? Well, chances are it's in our genes. Chances are genetic. Chances are Vita money was actually the money for not even for not definitely not for decades, definitely not for centuries, for millennials, for millennia. He said, okay, once Ghost gets going, how do you think the concept will apply to our Ghost Vita money? I mean, it applies directly. It's the reason why we have to stress the Vita money so strongly is because we need to put proper differentiation. How do we stand out? How do we compare to other cryptocurrencies? How do we compare to other crypto projects? And as we will discuss later in this series, so Bitcoin has a standing. So Bitcoin is reserve currency. Okay, that's cool. What is Ethereum? What does it stand for? Is that a cryptocurrency? Not necessarily. Why? First of all, they forked. Ethereum Classic was forked in, well, Ethereum Classic, well, okay, in today's terms, Ethereum Classic was forked into Ethereum. Why? Because there was a bug in the smart contract, which was abused, and lots of money has been lost. And Ethereum Classic said, hey, listen, the truth is the truth. You guys, screwed up. You lost your money. Too bad. Let's continue. And Ethereum team, including Vitalik, said, no, let's correct it, please. Let's correct it. So they corrected it. And since they corrected it, Ethereum essentially stopped being the source of truth. At least that's the ethos. So now they are what? Are they a decentralized computer? Okay, cool. Is that a is that a currency? Is that a currency to be a decentralized computer? That's that's what they have as their positioning, right? So you're saying its value comes from its utility. Its value is coming from its utility, correct? But what is it? Like, what is the utility? So let's assume we're building a car. Okay, cool. That's a good product to have, but it's only going to be benefiting those who drive in cars. iPhone, that's a great product, but it's only going to be benefiting those who use iPhones, right? But when we talk about money, money is something that everybody uses. 100% of people use money in different forms. They don't necessarily use dollars, or they don't necessarily use gold. They don't necessarily use Bitcoin. They use some type of money. Not everybody uses some type of car. They use some type of transportation, including their own feet, right? But do they use like car? Like, what's the adoption of cars? What's the market penetration of of cars globally? I mean, you would be surprised, but it's not far from 100%. Very, very far from 100%. To the point where lots of people in cities like New York don't even own cars, right? Because the subway transportation system is so much better, right? So what we are like, we need to have a proper positioning from perspective of what do we stand for. So upon greater analysis, especially based on the article from last week that we discussed, the permissionless, the lack of permissionlessness across major cryptocurrencies. It's essentially, and there's the whole topic of positioning in the Web3 chapter as well that I'm going to be working on this week. Without positioning, you don't have a project. So, okay, fine. Let's assume Ethereum is decentralized computer. Let's assume Ethereum could be sometimes compared to silver for whatever reason, although that's not true. Okay, let's assume it's silver, although it's elastic. So how could that be silver? Okay, then what is Cardano? Cardano is a proof of stake blockchain with 3%. Like they inflation is representing 97% of their increase. I think it's 2.1% total APY or something, right? Of which 97% of that 2.1% is inflation unbacked, and another 3.3% is pure fees. So nobody's using Cardano. Now, what is so special about Cardano? So Cardano, before Ethereum became proof of stake, Cardano said we are proof of stake. Okay, congratulations. The problem with Cardano was that they took forever to proceed with smart contracts. Okay, fine, but now they do have smart contracts. What is so special about Cardano? How come nobody's using it? To which the argument is, well, Cardano is still top 10, top 15 cryptocurrencies out there. I get it. What do they stand for? How much longer can you inflate the currency by 2% like essentially, unsustainably, because you're just purely inflating it. So if you're inflating by 2%, you better have investors who would substitute those 2% with capital. Otherwise, your token will be diluted. That's exactly what happens. If you look at the highs outside of Bitcoin and potentially Ethereum, there's not any other coin that has bypassed its high, all-time high that appeared either in 2020 or 2022. Check it for yourself. Oh, XRP is another one that did it after winning the lawsuit. That's about it. The reason why that happens is because they don't have any positioning. They don't stand for anything. They're a proof of stake blockchain. Congratulations, Cardano. Great. How are you different from Ethereum? Well, we are faster. Solana would say we are faster. Okay. Solana is faster, proof of stake. And of course, they are targeting enterprises, right? Okay. So then explain to me how come out of whatever, almost 7% inflation, only 0.6% of Solana's inflation coming from actual fees, and the rest is just pure unsubstantiated inflation. So your coin, your Solana coin drops by 5.5%, almost actually 6% every single year because inflation is that. So unless there's 6% of new capital entering the system, you will be losing 6% of your savings. So you put $100, next year you'll have $94 because more tokens will be minted and you're not going to get it because it's pure inflation. Right. So unless somebody deposits unless somebody would deposit some additional money, standing for 6%. So how do they do this? How does Solana kind of fund that? Well, they they put in significant amount of VC money into advertising and marketing for the name, and temporarily VCs and some enterprise players would put some money in, but it's an unsustainable play. Why? Because enterprises put money because they are expecting to make money off either other enterprises who are smart or are out of retailers. But there are not that many retailers. That's the whole point. Retailers are all suffocated by the super permissioned access to Solana. So you get this weird, so we have this like highly inflated currency. We call it cryptocurrency, and it's for enterprises because it's super fast. Okay, then explain to me why the fuck do they need to go to meme coins if enterprise volume is doing so well? To answer my own question is the enterprise volume is doing not so well at all because again the fee is only 0.6% and 7.1% is the total APY, which is quite shameful. So Solana has like this whole let's be faster. Nobody fucking needs a blockchain to be faster. They're selling that concept of being faster, but Bitcoin is 10 minutes per block and it's doing great as a reserve currency. You don't need faster. That's the whole point. Now, why would you need faster? You would need faster. The selling point is, well, because enterprises would need blockchain transactions to be like extremely fast and resilient. But they're missing the point. They don't understand what blockchain is. Blockchain is not a database that is replacing SQL. Blockchain is a database maintaining timestamps of actions. And you can group these actions into multiple transactions into one block. And the settlement, even if the settlement takes whatever, in case of say Bitcoin 10 minutes, it's still fine. It's still fast enough. It's okay. And then if it goes to say 13 seconds like Ethereum does, it's also fine. But Solana goes for like 1 millisecond or whatever, like which in reality of course doesn't happen. So like in reality, it's there's no proper decentralized finality with lots of errors, and that's why the blockchain always shuts down. As one of the whales wrote down recently in our whales chat that like Solana is going down like every fucking week. Yeah, because there's no proper consensus. So you get this like some type of hybrid Frankenstein of some like kind of enterprise type of play, but enterprise don't use it. So let's go meme coins. Enterprise doing so well that we have to go meme coins to keep ripping off retail investors. That's right. What I'm trying to say is Solana has no positioning. The positioning of enterprise is shit. It's very bad. Same thing with XRP. Nobody's using XRP. It's just for enterprise players. But enterprise players don't need XRP. That's the whole point. They don't need to put stuff on chain. Why would they reveal public information? How do we know that? How do we know that enterprise don't want to do that? Maybe they changed. No, they didn't change because we have information about OTC, over-the-counter swaps. And that, as I showed some time ago over the summer, is about $500 trillion worth of notional open notional of the OTC swaps, including interest rate swaps, including foreign exchange swaps and commodity swaps. So imagine 500 trillion, almost 600 trillion, while the global GDP is about 100 trillion. So they do this, so today the OTC transactions is 5x, and those OTC transactions you will be super unpublic. You'll never see them anywhere, and there's enterprise do not want those transactions to ever be public, right? So that's what Solana is kind of getting wrong. So now, kind of going back to the question, why Vita money is so important? We need to stand for something, and we do. That's the whole point. We just need to we have the proper mechanics, but we just need to understand what that mechanics represent in the real world for people to easier comprehend what we're trying to do. And it turns out that we are not just an average cryptocurrency. Why? Because average cryptocurrency just relies on transaction fees to hopefully pay the validators. But unfortunately, it's just not enough. And it's either, lucky coincidence or, thoughtful architectural analysis, design, build out, etc. of the blueprint of Ghost. But we came to the point where there are two sources of revenue for validators. The first one is the transaction fees, which are still going to be tiny for us as well, just like for any chain. Nothing we can do there. For Bitcoin as well, very tiny. Bitcoin is the best project so far. When you look at their transactional fees, it's pretty bad. So far, nobody's using it as much compared to its inflation. But with Ghost, you also have the bridging fees as another source of revenue. So now there are two sources of revenue, the transactional fees and also the bridging fees. And the bridging fees are unlimited. Not only that, but the bridging fees, the more the bridging fees there are, that will not impact the inflation in any way whatsoever. That's the most important part. So therefore, the Ghost will keep being inelastic with insane APY. That's how we change the chasm. Like it's insane what we're doing here. And that's called Vita, and nobody else is doing this. And why? Because again, every single chain so far relies simply on transaction fees. And then depending on their architecture, whether they have supply, fixed supply, or unlimited supply for their coin supply, or whether they have proof of stake, proof of work, proof of 30, whatever, whether they're permissionless or permissioned. So all of these things will show that in reality, from perspective of an actual cryptocurrency, there's only one Bitcoin, which is reserve currency. Some other proof of work coins may be similar to silver and copper. For example, Litecoin could be silver, for example, like Dogecoin could be, and Monero could be copper or something. I don't know, stuff like that. And then all the other projects, proof of stake projects, are just technology companies. That's the realization that I came to after diving deep. And then when you understand, oh shoot, these other like proof of stake blockchains, including Ethereum, are just technological companies. Okay, so what a technological company? What's the benchmark for it? Like, how big could it grow? Right? How many people would use it? What is the utility that people would have to like? Why would people would ever enter Ethereum? Well, because there's a dApp, XYZ. Okay, cool. But why would they need it if Ethereum is not a currency? Very, very different with Ghost, because if Ghost is a currency, which it is, then the thing is like, oh, then I could use Ghost to actually potentially kind of store my wealth there and also transact there safely. And it's a very different utility because everybody needs money. Everybody's using money on a daily basis. Right? So that's one. Another thing is, if all the other proof of stakes are just technological companies, then the question is, what type of incentives do founders and VC large investors have? Obviously, the only goal they have is a short-term goal of making money. Why? Because there's no long-term goal. Because the long-term goal would be to kind of get a proper positioning, like proper niche in what they are as a project, but they don't have that goal. Because enterprise is a shitty goal. As Solana proved it, we said that for years before any of these guys launched, and then everybody said, "Oh, well, look at Solana, look at this price action." Guys, look for another, like, just wait for another 5 years. Let's see. Give it some time, right? Like, obviously the price action within a month, like, it's, I understand, it's very amazing and blah blah blah, but just wait for another 5 months and see what's going to happen to Solana. See what's going to happen to XRP. See what's going to happen to all of these enterprise projects backed by a dollar, which is depreciating. Just watch, right? So therefore, kind of, since they don't have any long-term strategy, which is clear based on their very, very bad positioning, they have a short-term strategy. And what's a short-term strategy? Profit. Profit of whom? Profit of other enterprises, but other enterprises also smart, and they are all the same. Like, it's the same people in all this enterprise. So who is to profit off? The retail investors. And that's what they're fucking doing. So for us to rely that XRP would be changing the game somehow, no, it's not going to be changing the game. It's the same enterprise masqueraded as a Web3. Same thing with Solana. It's masked as a Web3. In reality, it's the same Microsoft that is screwing you over on the back end. It's the same Facebook that is screwing you over on the back end. It's the same IRS that is screwing you over on the back end. It's the same thing because the government merged with monopolies. That's the whole point. Let's put it differently. They did not merge. It's the same entity. Your family, 5 kids. You are elite, right? One of your guys is not very entrepreneurial. Okay, he's going to be heading a major IRS division. Another son of yours is way more entrepreneurial. Elon Musk. Okay, let's fund him. One thing I found out. Did you guys know that Sam Altman has 2 brothers at least? All 3 are amazing entrepreneurs, and you guys can go back to your families, right? Like, and you probably, lots of you guys have siblings, right? And analyze your situation. But in case of Altman family, all 3 brothers are insane entrepreneurs. Sam Altman obviously created ChatGPT, obviously by himself. He just got, massive funding from Elon Musk, and probably for his genius. Okay. And then he has 2 brothers. One brother raised 225 million for his startup. Another brother raised 150 million for his other startup. How's that possible? It's like all 3 are genius entrepreneurs. Maybe that is the case. Maybe that is the case. But did you know that Elon Musk also has a brother? And he's also doing quite well in his entrepreneurial ventures. They're probably just genius families. But you guys know from your own sibling situation, like, one sibling is a complete fucking idiot. One sibling is very smart. Another sibling is a workaholic, right? Like, you never see the same texture within siblings. Like, they're all different. Like, you right? Or your children, look at them, right? Like, everybody's very different. How come they all share the same genius traits? That's beyond me. The answer is, of course, they don't, right? It's just elites trying to sell to us the possibility of American dream by, kind of without saying that, oh, by the way, there has been massive government contract back in this up, or there have been massive connection back in this up. So going back to the technology companies that operate the same exact way, I would say the technology companies are Cardano, XRP, obviously, Solana, 100%. Ethereum, I'm tending to think more and more that Ethereum is just a technological company as well, unfortunately. Now, which blockchains are not technical companies? Bitcoin, it's a reserve currency. Monero, it's kind of a reserve currency with some privacy features, although we have some clashbacks with validators. By the way, it seems like the 51% attack did not really succeed, right? So it seems like the validators of Monero got their shit together. Maybe, hopefully. Dogecoin, same thing. Ethereum Classic, by the way, which is still proof of work, and they position themselves as, we are the largest and the most sustainable proof of work platform with smart contracts, which is true, which is absolutely true. So Ethereum Classic has a proper positioning, also as a currency, by the way, as opposed to Ethereum Classic. Because with Ethereum, conversely to Ethereum, because Ethereum Classic, the inflation is actually diminishing 20% every single 5 million blocks, which was quite surprising for me to find out, with the inflation today of around just 2%, while Solana is 6%. Okay, so that is very important. Let me say, okay, maybe an article video focusing on why most cryptocurrencies is not currency at all. Oh yeah, we're going to be discussing this. Well, first things first, look at that permissionless article, analyze that in more detail. Like, you will understand, based on the fact that these cryptocurrencies are not, like, how to say, they are not permissionless, and therefore they're not cryptocurrencies. Period. They're technological. If something is permissioned for me to maintain, for me to own as an infrastructure, that's not a currency in Web3. That's a currency in Web2. Because you, Mr. DK, myself, Scorpion, we have no influence over a dollar minting. Right? It's decided somewhere. Even Donald Trump has no impact on the Federal Reserve. So fucking scary. So fucking scary. Right? Some people say, oh, it's good. It's independent. It's independent institutions. Okay, yeah, sure. Unless certain political parties are impacting the Federal Reserve and others are not. Right? So it's clearly more liberal, the Federal Reserve. By the way, all the Federal Reserves globally are also way more liberal than conservative. Just FYI. So if the money in Web3 is not permissionless, it's permission, therefore it's not currency, because you cannot own that infrastructure. That's the first step. But we're going to be discussing in more detail as well in those Web3 series. Scorpion, how easy will it be at some point for large companies, VCs, to successfully fork Ghost, and what impedes them from having success? What impedes them from having success is the same thing what impedes them from having success today. I forgot who said that. I think it was one of the. Oh, I think it was Karl Menger, actually, the founder of the Austrian Economic School. So he was, I think it was in his book, The Origins of Money, if I'm claiming it correctly, where he said there's some theory that governments can force residents to use cash. And he's like, this is the biggest myth and the biggest joke ever. The governments can, of course, try to create money, but they can never, ever successfully force all its citizens to use it. I mean, they can establish a law saying that you have to do this. Like, for example, in Venezuela, Argentina, right? Like, you have to use this. But, you guys know that in those two countries in particular, there's black market exchange rate. And nobody's using the bank, the official central bank exchange rate, right? So, and Venezuela is, I would say, pretty dictatorial to some extent, right? And even in that country, there's massive black market for an alternative money. So Karl Menger says it's the people who must select the currency, and people do not select Solana. Another article, by the way, Solana is so successful, the technology is so fucking great. How many projects forked Solana so far? Because technology is so amazing. The answer is fucking no. No, nobody, zero. Nobody forked Solana. How many projects forked Sui network? The answer is zero. What about Near Protocol? What about Algorand? Zero. Let me go for EVM. That started as a super people pro-human community. And we have, I don't know, what, 50 plus EVM blockchains out there? Then we go for UTXO, which is Bitcoin. We have Litecoin, Monero, Zcash. Well, Monero is bytecode, but also very close. Dogecoin, NAM, like Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Classic, Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Diamond. Like, we have so many different forks because it's a useful technology, right? And Solana adoption tells us that, it's 0.6% of users who actually use it as far as transaction fees. And I would not be surprised if the majority of those transaction fees are funded by the foundation of Solana to imitate activity. I would not be surprised. There's no way to check. Okay? So people are voting that shit projects nobody wants to use, and great projects like Bitcoin people want to use. But problem with Bitcoin is it's not Vita. So it's a great reserve currency still, but not Vita money. So let me wrap up the great questions. Let me wrap this up. So we have fundamental properties of Vita money. Therefore, as we mentioned many times now, it's self-replication, very important. Bitcoin does not have it, and inelasticity, which Bitcoin has. And some protocols, some crypto projects do have inelasticity. Again, it's mostly proof of work projects. And Ethereum Classic is also proof of work. And some proof of stake may have inelasticity, say Cardano. Cardano has limited supply, so at some point in time they'll be perfectly inelastic, but they will not be self-replicable. Well, there would be with 0.1% coming from transaction fees, right? And then we're going to argue if Cardano is Web3 or not, and blah, 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 because the properties of Vita money, just these two properties, but Vita money lost, which we're going to discuss next time, why Vita money lost, right? So in more detail. But the idea is to bring in Web3 Vita money, in which case the Web3 Vita money will have self-replication as the first property, in elasticity as the second property, and be in a Web3 architecture as the third property. And then most of these crypto projects absolutely fail on Web3 component. Absolutely. Because they're not permissionless enough. They are not backed as far as inflation is coming through the roof, as opposed to actual adoption. The transaction fees nobody wants to use. Positioning, there's no fucking positioning. Some projects, surprisingly, are not open source. Say Hyperliquid, not open source. Lazy0, not open source. Uniswap V4, not open source. And the sustainability of rewards. So there are many of these aspects which will be discussed. These articles are in the process. They're very difficult articles, but you guys will be delighted to read them out. So the most important thing is some whales asked this question, and frankly speaking, I asked this question myself. In elasticity, is Vita money actually elastic? Inelastic. So inelastic again means that it cannot be produced on a wish, right? Like, so it takes time to produce. But say in case of livestock, we see livestock everywhere. Livestock is literally everywhere today, right? So like I can Torbjörn, you can have a you can have a farm with whatever, growing olive trees, and I can have a farm growing whatever, right? So like we can all have that, or I can have a whole herd of livestock. So it seems like there's so much livestock everywhere in the world. It seems like there's so much food everywhere in the world. So to the point where that stuff became elastic. And the idea is that it's not true, right? So we have this technological distortion of scarcity. So they started using all these pesticides, right? All these hormones to try to accelerate growth, to try to accelerate the typical cycle. But this is an illusion because why? So here's the meat supply per person as of 2022 coming from United Nations. So notice how while in the US, for example, so like the more red it is, the more available meat is, and therefore meat consumption is. So yeah, US is doing pretty well. Canada doing pretty well. Mongolia doing extremely well because they grow their own thing. Australia doing well, right? Brazil, Argentina, like insane meat countries. Europe is doing pretty well. But look at Africa. So how come how come meat did not spread there? So we can say that, okay, so in certain geographical regions, meat is potentially elastic, potentially. But in other parts of the world, it's completely inelastic. The reason why Africa does not have much consumption because there's no fucking meat. That's terrible. Same thing India. Well, some people say, oh, India is just a vegetarian country. There's a myth that it's a vegetarian country. In fact, they consume shit ton of meat, but they can't because it's just not available. It's just not available. That's a big thing. So the first argument is that while meat and food overall could be considered to be elastic globally, it's actually not. It's super fragmented geographically. That's the first argument. Second argument is, in fact, that's the consumption of meat. So low-income countries consume nothing. Low-middle income countries consume nothing. That's like almost half of the population, global population, 4 billion people consume almost no meat. They're not vegetarian. There's just no meat. So, meat is elastic. Meat is everywhere. No, it's not. No, it's not. That's the whole point. It's tough to produce meat. Meat takes time to be produced, right? Livestock takes time. Food takes time to be grown. Another thing is the quality of meat. So the quality of meat. So when we say that self-replicable, that's very important. Self-replication. Self-replication must be specific. So it must be organic. So we're going to be separating between two types of APYs. We're going to call it organic APY and synthetic APY. So anything that is inflation is synthetic APY. Anything which is organic, such as transaction fees, bridging fees, that is organic APY. So self-replication must come from organic APYs only. The source has to be organic. If it's synthetic, it's not self-replication. So in case of meat, we have organic meat and they call it conventional meat. I'm not even kidding, guys. Like they call it literally conventional. So I just call it non-organic, because screw them. But they call it organic and conventional, right? They just don't want to call it something else, right? So look at that non-organic meat and look at the organic meat. And that's a lot. So look at how inelastic this is. Look how small this supply is. Europe, US, trying to grow the market of organic meat unsuccessfully. It's very difficult. Why do we care about organic meat here? because we need to compare livestock today compared to livestock 2,000 years ago. Of course, there have been some improvements in biology and medicine, right? As far as maybe different types, different new breeds of cows and stuff like that, right? Absolutely, but they still need to be compared as far as organic source, and we cannot compare cattle from 2,000 years ago to cattle today in majority of it. So this stuff, yes, somewhat elastic, again, geographically fragmented, but somewhat elastic. But organic meat is inelastic as hell, even today. Even today. So Vita is still very inelastic. And they've done some analysis on where is this? Do I have it? Yeah, on comparison of organic versus non-organic meat. You guys know better than me, right? So especially if you have kids, you started looking into kind of what you eat, right? So there are lots of acids and omega-3 and stuff like that that is found in greater concentration in organic meat compared to inorganic meat. So all this conventional meat, as they call it, is actually kind of I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's not as good for you, even from the kind of chemical constituents, right, level. So that's very important. So when we talk about self-replication cannot be like sheep cannot be cloned, right? It has to go through the traditional process. Like, I mean, sorry for like a bad example, but like kind of no C-section, like natural birth, even to that point, right? So it has to be natural. The APY has to be organic APY. Yeah. So that what Vita would be. If it's not organic or therefore synthetic, it's not Vita money. Cardano, the reason why it's not Vita money. Of that 2.1% APY, 0.1, 0.2% is organic. The rest is not organic. It's synthetic. So now you have synthetic coins mixed with organic coins, and you get this Frankenstein of coins. Ethereum, same thing. Before it was proof of work, now it's proof of stake. Okay, so before I had to spend my electricity costs to mine Ethereum. So that was organic good APY. Now it's some type of proof of stake. It's a different source of origination of coins. So they mixed previously organic with some synthetic plus inflation. So they have this like massive Frankenstein. So we all received kind of our ETH in different sources. Some was bought it on ICO, some was bought it on by mining or extracted by mining it. Some was got it by staking it. No, that's not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be purely self-replication. So I got it the same way how Scorpion you would get it, the same way how Mr. IDK you would get it, and that series continues, right? So that's very important. That's what I wanted to cover today. That's the Vita concept, just Vita in Web 2 world, and of course it failed. That's why we don't see it today. So we're going to be discussing why it failed as money. So there's lots of arguments for that. And slowly, again, guys, like there's lots of stuff to cover. The whole framework of Web3, what we call it, how it's defined, etc. Then we're going to go to why Ghost is Web3, and then we're going to discuss how other cryptocurrencies are not Vita money at all, not even close. And then we're going to discuss what's the potential market size for Vita money versus reserve currencies. Hope you liked it. Thank you so much for staying. How many viewers we have today? Live viewers, not that many, but that's fine. All right, so see you guys next week. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye bye.